Hello everyone, I'm Chloe Johnson and welcome to this fresh business thinking webinar series, Lockdown Learning for Businesses, supported by BT. BT Skills for Tomorrow aims to empower businesses and their employees with the digital skills to help grow their business. The Skills for Tomorrow website includes free learning content that small businesses and their employees can access at any time on topics such as promoting your business with online advertising, making sure your customers can find you online, and much more. To find out more, you can click on the link in the comments. Coronavirus is continuing to be a challenge for small businesses and entrepreneurs across the UK. The outbreak leaves an overwhelming uncertainty into the future for business owners, but this is a time when as a business community, we need to come together and support one another. And we're lucky enough to work with organisations and individuals who are passionate about supporting entrepreneurs during this difficult time. One of those is our speaker today, Joel Blake OBE, a multi-award winning businessman, thought leader and business speaker. His core expertise is helping organisations develop innovative business support systems through fintech and diversity. Today, Joel will focus on key principles to help entrepreneurs develop a positive and holistic leadership mindset that impacts their business, teams and themselves. Joel will be talking for around 40 minutes and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. So if you do have any questions, you can leave them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and we'll do our best to get to them later on in the session. Later on in the session, there will be a poll for you to vote for. Your vote will remain anonymous. That's all from me for now and I'll pass over to you, Joel.
Oh, hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Chloe and the team here at GBEA, BT and all partners for what I hope will be a really informative opportunity for all the participants. For me, entrepreneurial leadership is a real great vehicle to lead ourselves and our businesses through this recovery and beyond. And I just want to share with you kind of 12 key principles that I've learned on my journey as an entrepreneur over the last 15 years. And I hope that what I share with you today will help you on your own journey. This is much more of a personal development approach as opposed to a formal business seminar. So I hope there'll be points for you to really reflect and for you to think about what your next steps will be and your journey moving forward as the great entrepreneur and business owner that you are. So for me, this journey really starts on the fact that it's about being your authentic self as an entrepreneur and as a leader of either yourself or your organization. And I think that's often found in the way that you're often perceived. I mean, I remember speaking at an event a number of years ago now, probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And, you know, you turn up, you know, you get asked to go to the green room, you get your tea and coffee. And I remember standing in the line, speaking with this gentleman as we were getting our refreshments. And, you know, just good old fashioned, you know, how you doing? What do you do? What do I do? Type of thing. And we really got a really great rapport in between picking up the tea and the coffee and the sugar and the milk and, you know, filled our cups and said, you know, look forward to seeing you in the event. So then about 15, 20 minutes later, I found myself backstage and this gentleman actually came onto the stage and he explained that the main host for the evening was unfortunately unable to attend, and he's the MC. And it shook me with fear because I realized that this is the gentleman I've been speaking to in the line, how getting the coffee. And if he's the last minute replacement, then he hasn't got any bio, he hasn't got any information. How is he going to introduce me? How is he going to position me? Then I'm going to come on stage and, you know, come into that kind of envisioning what he's presented as the image. But what really amazed me is what he said. He said, I'd like to introduce to you a great guy, the type of guy your father would love to have a drink with, and who your mother had wished she had met before your father. To this day, I don't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but I can promise you your mothers are completely safe, and there's got to be no reason for you to be in any fear whatsoever. And I hope your mother and father have a fantastic relationship. But what that really highlighted for me was the importance of being your authentic self, because as much as he said that quote, it was because he formed a view of who he thought I was. And that's why the second part I'm still not sure of, because I don't know what I said that made him think that. But the ability for someone to create a vision or a perception of you is really, really important. But how often do we think about that for ourselves as entrepreneurial leaders? How often do we think about our own perception of ourselves and how that has an impact on what we do? How often do we think about our values and our habits and our disciplines and how that affects our ability to achieve success and change? So I greatly believe that it starts from a much more deeper place in terms of answering that question, because it starts in your experience, it starts in your conditioning, it starts in your beliefs. And these are elements I'm going to go through throughout this talk today. But I just wanted to share a bit of my story with you, just to give some context. I won't go too deep because it's not all about me, but hopefully it just gives a bit of a flavor of why I'm so passionate about this area of entrepreneurial leadership. So my journey is one of a normal working class lad from Birmingham. So this picture on the screen is the area where I grew up. And as you can see, many high-rise flats, not so much old Rovers and old Mini Coopers like that anymore. But if you was to go to that same area now, none of those flats are there. They've all been knocked down. It's all been redevelopment. It's much more of a young professional environment. But I remember growing up in that environment where there was a conditioning that achievement was limited, and aspiration wasn't something that was really going to be manifested. It was something that you might dream about, but it wasn't certainly something that you're not destined to achieve. So this idea of being a leader and this idea of creating success was quite limiting because everybody else had that same mindset, and that created a culture of everyone who grew up in that area. So I remember having to look at myself many, many times, and no, I didn't know Barack Obama. No, I've never met him, and no, I don't think I am him. But what this picture is representing is the fact that there comes a point where you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision on whether or not you're willing to do whatever it takes to achieve success, both for yourself and for those who you have an impact upon, whether that is the market that you work with, whether that's your customers, whether that's your staff, your community, etc. And so I made a decision around the age of 16, 17 that I really wanted to get into owning my own business, having my own sense of responsibility, kind of charting my own course. And therefore, I had to go through a bit of a transformation of my own self in terms of my own mindset of what I needed to do in order to achieve. And so over the last kind of 20 years, it's been an amazing journey. And so currently, I'm someone who likes to take risks. So as you can see in the top left-hand corner there, we did a charity skydive, a group of entrepreneurs and business leaders across the region. We did a skydive last year, and we raised about £25,000 for charity, which was really humbling for us. And I was about to swear then. It was kind of scary for us at the time. I like to speak and share those views and feelings and experiences. You know, humbled to have won many awards in my time. Had the privilege of advising the government on their support for entrepreneurs, both practically on the ground and at a government level in terms of policy development. Amazing opportunity and an amazing point in my life in receiving an OBE in 2016, just for the passion that I have for this area of work. So that was really, really humbling, and great for mum and dad who came from the Caribbean in the late 50s, early 60s, and thought about the UK as the mother country, and to be in Buckingham Palace with their son based on their efforts and their blood, sweat and tears was humbling for them. And then my own business and activity. So GFA Exchange, we're a fintech company that supports the financial lending space. And I'm also vice president of the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce, looking at how we can help businesses to scale internationally right across the Commonwealth on the back of Brexit. So my journey has been a really fast-paced one, but one that I'm humbled by, and one where I'm still learning. And that's something I want to immediately share with you all on this webinar, that there's no such thing as you've just made it as a leader. You're constantly building. You're constantly having to shape and change and grow and learn. And the moment you think you've made it is the moment you're going backwards. You know, you remember when you were a child and you had that kind of childlike innocence about what you wanted to be, how you were going to get there. Sometimes I think that's been beaten out of us as entrepreneurs because of life and the journey that we're on. But what I want to share with you throughout the rest of this talk is the 12 principles that I think could be useful for you as a leader in your organization as you continue to build your own leadership style, approach, and lead yourself and your team through this recovery. So as we go through these 12 steps, there's going to be a couple of reflection points where I'm going to be giving you maybe 30 seconds to a minute just to think about the questions that I'll put on the screen. If you've got a pen and paper to hand, feel free to take down the questions. And it's not for you to answer back to us now, but there are questions I'd like you to ask yourself in your own quiet time and be honest about the answers that you give, because as much as we're having to put on our suit of armor and be out here in the world of business to achieve the success that we're trying to achieve for our customers, for our staff, and for our communities and the economy at large, it starts from us as leaders being congruent with who we are and what we're about. So those questions are there to challenge you, but in a positive way for you to think about. And as we said earlier, there'll be a poll for you to take part in a bit later on. So let's get going. So step one, or principle one, is for you to clarify your vision. So if I was to ask you, what is it that you seek to achieve for yourself, your business, for all those who you have influence over, what would that be? Would it be some kind of very simple vision statement approach? Or are you going into detail about what success looks like? Because it's the detail that I want you to think about. So for example, if your goal is to grow your business by 20% over the next 2 years, for argument's sake, what does 20% look like? What does that look like in terms of commercial numbers? But also, what does that look like in terms of the type of business that you have? How many staff will you have? What will your brand be? What will the colors of your organization be? Who's going to be there with you along the way? You know, that clarity of the vision is so important, because as an entrepreneurial leader, the more clear you are, is the more people will come with you. The more clear you are, is the more you can share a vision that people can buy into. And I don't mean that in a very flippant or very discriminatory way, but is the more they will buy into the passion and the drive and the desire that you have as the leader to lead them. So do think about how clear your vision actually is. And if you're not sure on how to do that, ask people around you. You know, set the benchmark of what you're thinking about, but ask for people's insight and support to help shape that clarity. But once you get that, you will know what that clarity is. It's a bit like when you was in school and you'd see that boy or that girl for the first time that you fancied and you got those butterfly feelings. You know, if you're not feeling like that every single time you think about the vision for your business, I would question whether it's a vision that you truly want to achieve. So clarity of vision is truly important. Principle two is understanding your what versus your why. So your why is the purpose. So why are you on this journey? Why are you being the leader that you are in order to achieve the things that you say you want to achieve? In this time of COVID-19 and the turbulent time that we've gone through, why is it that you even want to continue? Why is it that you want to go through this phase of recovery to achieve what you want? Is the purpose and is the vision strong enough? Are you still committed to that vision? Does that vision need to change? But once you've got clarity on your why, that then helps you with the what. You know, the what is then how you're going to do it. Like, what do you need to look like? What do you need to do? What time frame do you need to do it in? You know, what support do you need? So separating your what versus your why is very, very important, because your why is the North Star. It's the end game. And the end game shouldn't just be financial. I'm not saying financial isn't important, but it shouldn't just be financial. The why and the end game should be something that is transformational. And then the what is what you need to do to get there. So make sure you separate your what versus your why. Because once you do that, you have the ability to then take on board number three, which is to embrace your fear. So as entrepreneurs, we're often seen as the little man or the little woman, you know, fighting against the system, fighting against change, ready to drive forward with our new innovative idea and our uniqueness and our passion and our drive and our ability to achieve that vision. And sometimes that journey can be scary. And as the entrepreneurial leader, you are often faced with the responsibility of facing those challenges and facing your fear head on. But as an entrepreneurial leader, it's also important to recognize, especially in this time that we're in, that your fear is a psychological state of mind. Yes, there are practical and, negative outcomes that can be achieved or can happen to you that you may not want. Yes, there are tangible things that could put you and set you back. But embracing your fear from a psychological mindset point of view enables you to then think about, okay, if I'm fearful about this, and if that was going to happen, what can I now do as a strategy to put that in place so that if that does happen, I know what I would do then? In other words, if that's going to happen, this is what I would do. Because by thinking about it in that particular way, fear itself becomes a motivator. It doesn't become a restrictor. It doesn't become a barrier. It becomes a tool that you can harness and utilize to drive you forward, because you're then becoming aware of the pitfalls, aware of the gaps, aware of the weaknesses, but you're putting a strategy in place so that when that happens, or if that does happen, you know what you would do. And so fear becomes something that you're ready for. Fear becomes something that you're aggressive against. Fear becomes something that you drive towards, not something that sets you back. So do think about the things that you are fearful of and think about the strategy. A mentor of mine once made me look at this in a very simple way. She said to me, if you see a spider, what would you do? And I said, I'm finding a slipper, I'm finding a bottle, I'm finding a Hoover, I'm sucking it up. And she said, well, okay, I don't really condone the kind of animal rights aspect of that, but you have a strategy in place. So if you do see a spider, you know what you would do. So why you're fearful of a spider? That just clicked into place for me. So, think about your fear and think about what you would do if that fear was to manifest, and therefore there should be no fear at all. Step 4, watch your language. But I don't mean how you talk to other people, I mean how you talk to yourself as a leader. So often as a leader, we have to put on this kind of brave face in order to go out there and lead others. And again, more than in this time than ever before, it's so important for us to be able to step forward and lead others through these turbulent and challenging times. So the thoughts and the language that we use about ourselves to ourselves is really, really important, because your thoughts create the feelings, or I'd say the emotions. The emotions create the feelings create the actions, and the actions give you the results. So when you're thinking about something, try and connect with how it's making you, how you respond to those thoughts. Think about how that makes you feel. Think about how then that feeling underpins the actions that you take, and then think about the results that you're getting. Because how you speak to yourself, and I don't even just mean verbally, I just mean how you speak to yourself is very, very important. I mean, how many times have you hit a blocker in your business and you've said, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so thick, what an idiot, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. So what happens next time you hit a roadblock? Well, you automatically get back into that mindset. But if you think to yourself, oh my gosh, okay, I made a mistake there, what can I learn from that situation? You will always see these challenges as a learning experience. And so the conversation that you're having with yourself is always progressive and proactive. So mind your language about yourself, because that then has an impact on the results that you get. So those are the kind of first 4 key things I want to kind of share with you. And here's our first reflection point. So as I said, if you've got a pen and paper, feel free to write these questions down, or just have a read of them and just think about them for yourself while you're on this course. So what does success look like to you? And I've highlighted the word look, because how you perceive success is how then you will operate towards achieving that success. That's then influencing how you lead others towards that success. But do how you see success translate with how others see it? What's the number one barrier to your success right now? In these times of COVID, there are some immediate barriers, but overall, what is the number one barrier to you? And why is this barrier so important to you? So what is the number one barrier and why is it so important? So 3 quick questions, and I'll just give you literally 30 seconds just to think about them, write them down, maybe just have a think about the answers for yourself, and then we'll move on. Thank you. Thank you for taking part in that short exercise. So moving forward, so once you've got to a point where you're very clear about what you're trying to achieve, where you want to go, where the vision that you're trying to share, you've identified the fears, you've put yourself into a positive state, and then you're now going out there to start actioning all of that activity. You have to be able to look at number 5, which is to understand who your frenemies are. Interesting, that word frenemies. I don't mean your enemies. Your enemies are very easy to identify. And in fact, your enemies, you probably want to know more who your enemies are. You probably find out who your enemies are quicker than your frenemies. So your frenemies are those who you would think would be with you and be supporting you and be on the same journey as you. But then when the proverbial hits the fan, you see a change, you see a switch. You see that the support you expected wasn't there. Your frenemies could be family members, it could be people in your organization, it could be other stakeholders outside the organization you thought had your back. So the reason why I feel that's really important, because I've been there, you know, especially in the early days of businesses where, you know, and I've had what, five startups to date, and in every one I've been let down by other people who I thought were there with me. And you know, you can batter yourself over the head so many times thinking, oh, I've done it again. But every time that's happened, it's sharpened my tool, because it's made me realize that I've accepted that loner journey as a leader, and I embrace that loneliness, and I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a vacuum that enables me to be the best that I can be. And so whether it's someone who's an enemy or not, it gives me the ability to be able to ensure that I'm humble enough to know what other people want, and be able to articulate that, but also be willing to defend the vision and defend the outcome that we've all supposedly agreed to work towards. So understanding your frenemies is about understanding the relationships that you have with those most closest to you, which is really, really important, because it then feeds into principle 6, which is about being willing to burn your bridges. Bit of a tough one for me, because again, there's been many bridges I've had to burn personally and professionally because it just hasn't aligned. And it's not always because it's been a negative thing by the other person. It's because I've had to learn that I have to burn certain habits and disciplines in order to achieve success. And at some point, the people that you were on that journey with, it's no longer relevant for them to continue with you. And that's not necessarily their fault. You know, life is often like a motorway, and people come out at different intersections and they come on and come off. But burning your bridges is also about making sure that you're being committed to doing the things that you say you are going to do, and doing the things that you say are necessary, and following through in order to be the true leader that you are. And that's often difficult, and it can be a very, very lonely place, because the outcome and the responsibility is for you. But I would challenge you back also to ask, in this time of recovery from COVID and beyond, I would challenge you to think about what are the old habits, disciplines, ways of working, models of working that are no longer relevant, and what are the new things that you might need to put in place as you move from who you were to where you're going to be. What are the habits and disciplines that you need to stop? What are the things that are going to be a hindrance that may have been the very thing that gave you success in the past? So there's an honesty and a reality check, and maybe a conversation that you might need to have with your teams, customers, whomever, just to make sure that the future path that you're about to embark on is not hindered, and the success is not hindered by the past. And therefore, what bridges do you think you may need to burn? Which then leads on to number 7, which is about understanding that you have to be adaptable to change. And Charles Darwin absolutely said it best. You know, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that is most adaptable to change. And I'm sure every single one of us right now on this webinar has had to be adaptable to change in more ways than we probably even care to. But it's the survivors of this change who will be the winners long term. Part of adapting to change is being very, very clear about the value that you provide, and making very, very sure that you're the only one who can provide that level of value in the way that you do. And it's making sure you're validating that with the very people who can help you to grow from that. So when you're thinking about success in the future, think about the thing that is going to help you to adapt to change much more quickly than your competitors, but as a leader that enables you to lead others through that change. And that's really, really important, more than ever before. Which leads on to number 8, which is the power of your brand. So as an entrepreneurial leader, you have a brand. Not your organizational brand. I'm on about your brand as the leader. Because how people perceive you will give some indication of the level of value that they think you can provide to them. So how you come across, the values that you have, the things that you stand for will have an influence on the way in which you can lead others. How you lead yourself will be seen as a way of how you would lead others. So it's important to really understand what your leadership brand is, which is separate from your company brand, but your leadership brand is really, really important. So for example, as a leader, are you a servant leader? So you're happy to just to sit in the background and lead from the back? Are you a forward leader where you're at the front of the pack and you're leading the direction and you're driving people through? Are you an empathetic leader that really takes the time to understand people's needs and then shapes the solution with them? Or are you much more of a dictator leader where you're telling people what's going to be happening and you drive forward? You know, those are just examples of different types of leadership styles, but it's important that you understand how those things play into your brand and how those values have an impact on how people perceive you. Because what's really important about your brand is you know, this phrase here from Seth Godin, which I truly believe that people need to understand what they're going to get from you. So Seth Godin here says that the power of your brand is a prediction of what to expect times the emotional power of that expectation. And I love this second part. If I encounter a brand and I don't know what it means or does, it has zero power. Now, he's talking about a business brand in this context, but that absolutely relates to you as an individual leader or a team of leaders who are leading the organization. If people don't know what to expect when they encounter you, then you're not really powerful enough for them. And if they don't know what your brand means for them or will do for them, you're not relevant until they understand that. So if you're a leader of your organization, you're the leader of your business going through these times of change and turbulence, and people can't connect with your leadership ability and your ability to lead them through this time of change, then what power do you have? And how are you using the power that you do have to shift that balance. So something for you to consider and think about there, which brings me into reflection point number 2. So what makes you think that you are the best person to lead? And yes, I'm coming straight at you with these questions, with this particular slide here. So I really want you to think about that question. You know, what makes you think that you're the best person to lead? Put your ego to one side. What is it about you that makes you the best person to lead? And then number 2, how do you validate that? So what makes you think that you're the best person to lead, and how are you validating that that's true? And be honest about that. Are you self-validating that? Do you have mechanisms in place where other people are validating that for you? Are your customers telling you that? Are your staff team telling you? Like, how are you validating that you're the best person to lead? And then the third question, so now you've done that, where do you need to improve? Because as I said with the one of the very first slides here, leadership is a continually building process. You don't just become a leader, you constantly become a better leader. So where can you improve in order to become an even better leader than you are? So again, I'll just give you 30 seconds just to write down those questions for you to reflect on later, or for you just to think about now for yourself. Well, what makes you think you're the best person to lead? How do you validate that? And where do you think you need to improve? So thank you for taking the time to do that. So we've gone through the whole process of setting the vision, understanding your fears, understanding the weaknesses, etc., making sure you're using the right language. We then talked about embracing fear and using it as an advantage. We've talked about being adaptable to change. We've talked about how you can then be able to be your most authentic self and bringing people with you and building that sense of a community around you. But as we move into the third piece, it's important that community becomes that tribe, and taking some of that from Seth as well, the idea of building a tribe. It's such an important thing, and it's one that I would completely get behind in any environment, in any room, because building your tribe means that the leadership ability and power that you have has now become manifested. So it's no longer just what you think as an individual. It's no longer what your team thinks, your staff thinks, your internal network thinks. It's now what your tribe and your external networks now think, because you've been able to manifest that sense of leadership into value that they want and are ideally willing to pay for on a continual and repeatable basis. And the only way you're going to be able to scale your business is by having a tribe of repeatable customers, or at least the volume of customers that gives you the ability to scale. So building that tribe is really, really important. But building a tribe is also about making sure you're listening to that tribe, listening to their needs, listening to their wants, and being able to bring a sense of humility within your leadership style to listen and serve based on that responsibility and that insight that you're getting from your tribe. So listening and building a tribe, listening to after building a tribe is really, really crucial, because it's within that listening that enables you to take those calculated risks to grow and scale. And so leading your people, yourself to a point is fantastic, but taking the calculated risks needed to grow is where transformational change will come. And it's in those calculated risks where you will be able to achieve the vision that you had at the very, very beginning, and that satisfying that why that you asked yourself. So it's really, really important to be tuned into how you calculate those risks and what's necessary and needed in order to do so. Because alongside of that is making sure that you build the resilience when you take those risks. So let me explain that in a little bit more detail. Taking calculated risks is great, and getting the impact that you want from those risks, is wonderful. But the yin and yang of that is when you take those calculated risks, they won't always go your way. So you've got to be thick-skinned and build that resilience to keep going and to continue to take those risks. So as a leader, that resilience is super, super important, because if it is important to you, you will find that way. And if not, you will find an excuse why you can't achieve what you wish to achieve. And it's easy to give excuses. And controversially, and I apologize if I offend anyone, but COVID-19 in itself could be one of those excuses. Yes, it's detrimental to all our businesses. Yes, it's changing and it's challenging. Yes, we'll see many businesses fail. Yes, it's a horrible time. But within all of that, there is the opportunity to learn, to regroup, to refresh, to reflect, to rejuvenate, and to reward yourself for that success that you will achieve through recovery. So whilst you're going through these challenging times, utilize this time as a way of finding new ways to grow and to be the best that you can be. And don't find yourself using this situation as an excuse. Where it is having a detrimental effect, 100%, I get it, I understand that. But don't use that as an excuse to not make the transformational changes that you need to make in order to achieve the success long term. Really, really important to think about that. And so through that resilience, just keep on stepping. You know, that's kind of my final 12th step. Keep stepping. Notice I'm not saying keep jumping. Notice I'm not saying running. I'm saying keep stepping, because step by step is when you learn something else. There'll be times when you'll be able to run, and there'll be times when you'll be able to jump, but you'll still need to understand the steps in between. You'll still need to be able to understand what it is that you need to do and be able to measure the impact of what you're doing every little step of the way. And don't be ashamed and don't see it as a negative to take your time, but where you can see the ability to jump and to run and to scale and to grow and to become that next wave of leader, go for it. But give yourself the time to learn and step along the way. Because the reality is that as much as there are challenging times ahead, it's important to make sure that you're reflecting on how you're taking those steps. So the third and final reflection exercise here, where are you leading yourself and others? So where are you stepping to, you know? Where are you leading yourself? You know, what does recovery look like and where are you going? Who holds you accountable for the outcome and why? And again, not who is going to, but who is holding you accountable for the outcome and why? You know, who's going to just be that check and balance for you? Who's going to give you that hug when you need it and that kick up the arse when you need it too? And then what is the next action that you will take? So I'm not necessarily looking for answers to that final question now, but I will implore you to think about what is the next action that you're going to take? Not the next 5 actions, the next 10. What's the next one action that you're going to take? And then what will you then do after that? And then what will you do after that? And yes, you've got the kind of North Star in your mind. You've got the end goal in your mind. I totally get that. But every single step brings you closer to that vision. Every single step brings you closer. So I'd implore you to think about what's just the next action that you're going to take. So again, just a quick 30 seconds, just to reflect on those questions. Again, write them down if you wish to answer in your own time. Think about the answers now, and I'll just give you 30 seconds. And then we'll go into the quick poll after this on just to kind of to support you with maybe some of the thinking around your next action. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to complete that exercise. So I've gone through those 12 steps. So I just refreshed them for you. So clarifying your vision, separating your what versus your why, embracing your fear, watching your language, understanding who your frenemies are, be prepared to burn bridges of habits and discipline, know what your brand, so be adaptable to change, know your own authentic brand, build a tribe and listen to them, take calculated risks, but be willing to build the thick skin of resilience with those risks, and finally, keep on stepping. So thank you for taking the time to listen to those 12 steps. Just going to ask the team just to put up the poll at this moment in time. And what I'd like you to do is just to think about these questions here. And we'll give you just a minute and a half just to answer these questions here. So as we know, in these times, cash flow is absolutely king or queen. But what other areas do you wish to develop? Wow. Fantastic answers coming through. Yep. Brilliant. Keep that coming. Fantastic. I think that's more or less everyone. I think, oh, just a couple more coming through. Wow. Loving the shifts. I mean, as a bit of a data person, I find it fascinating, the shifts. But I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you for oh, still more. Oh, poll is closed. Brilliant. Thank you for answering those answers. And look, straight away, you can see the results right there. 60% of you are focusing on access to leadership and management capability. Absolutely important. But obviously, a very close second is access to finance. You know, without the cash, it's difficult to run our businesses. But we also need the leadership behind us to drive forward with that money. Brilliant. Third there is around access to innovation. So business models, efficiency, processes and systems. It's really important to see where you can innovate at these times. Access to markets, absolutely. Where are the new opportunities? Where are the new customers? But where are ways in which you can add value to your existing customers to keep them for longer? Because as we all know, longer you keep your customers, a lot more cheaper than finding new ones. And access to talent. So what that pattern shows me, just very, very quickly, is that the more stronger leadership capability you have, and the more you can use finance as a tool with that capability, is the more you can find more ways of developing, growing, making your business more efficient, which then enables you to open up yourself to new markets, new opportunities, and then have a much more easier and a much more diverse way with those diverse opportunities to put in the talent needed to provide customer services and the support that your clients need and that your customers need in order to generate the value that you want. So thank you very much for sharing your views on that poll. We can now close that poll. And in my summary, I'd just like to just thank you for taking the time to join us on this call today. Obviously, it's not a very traditional webinar in terms of formal business elements, but I wanted just to take the time for us all to step back and really look at who we are as individuals and leaders through this time. Thank you for the questions that have come through the chat, and we'll switch those in a moment. But I just want to thank you all for taking the time to be on this call today. And I wish you all the best of luck in your business. Understand that success is multi-layered. So people will see what success means to them, but it's important for you to define what success means to you as a leader, because all these little things happen behind the scenes, which people don't often see. You know, they don't see the hard work, they don't see the tenacity, they don't see the endurance, they don't see the power and the pain and blood, sweat and tears. But you can achieve whatever you want as the leader if you just take the time to be the best that you can be. So thank you very much for your time. And I will stop sharing the screen and we can just spend a little time just to go through some of those questions. But I thank you for being with me today. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn or send me a quick tweet, and happy to kind of continue the conversation offline. But thank you again, and I wish you all the very best of luck in your businesses.
Thank you so much, Joel. That was great. We've had a lot of questions come through. The first one is from Mac, who says, thank you for the webinar today. What would you say is your most successful achievement in your career?
Wow. Gosh, there've been a few highlight moments, but I think the best and the most successful one for me, it sounds going to sound a cliche, but it was the first time I got my very first client. My first ever business, I'd set up a mentoring consultancy for schools because I saw a lack of support for kids and an increase in kids from disadvantaged backgrounds at risk of exclusion. So it was the first time I got a paid invoice from my very first school, because that was the stamp that I was in business. I'd created something, it was of value, and somebody was willing to pay me for it. And it's because I identified a need and I was able to communicate my solution. So it helped me to really understand what that really meant to be in business. That was my most successful. But, you know, there's been a number of great things along the way, but that's the one thing that I think sticks to mind.
The next question is from Julie. Do you recommend having a mentor along the leadership journey, and what leaders are the most inspirational to you?
Absolutely. I slightly hesitate because I think there's different levels of mentors. And so it's important to be very clear on the type of mentor that you have and why. And you can learn just as much from bad mentors as you can from good mentors. You know, bad mentors highlight the things that you shouldn't be doing, and it saves you making those mistakes. But a good mentor will give you the benefits and the experience of their mistakes and their experience. So understanding the relationship that you have is important. And the type of mentor, you know, if you need someone who's got a very specific expertise in an area, then seek that expertise. But if you want a general mentor who can give a holistic view, then seek that. So just understand what you want to mentor for and why and for how long. You know, I've got mentors who've been with me for 10, 12 years. I've got some mentors I've only known for 3 months and I won't see them again. So it really depends. And in terms of leaders who inspire, it's going to sound again a bit of a cliche again, but I'm inspired by people who are inspired themselves. You know, I buzz off the energy of seeing people just getting up and moving and making things happen. And so whilst there are great people in the world of business who've done some amazing things, I also don't know what they went through to get there other than what they're telling me. I don't know the bits that you don't see. So when people share that, I see that and I learn from that. That's what really drives me. So I'm inspired by the journeys rather than a leader per se.
The next question is from Rachel. What would be your advice for someone in the early stages of starting a company when they are the first person they know to be self-employed? My peers think I'm nuts and my family think it's a mistake to leave full-time employment. I'm also in the tech industry too, where it's difficult to be taken seriously as a woman in her early 20s. I probably have a dose of imposter syndrome too and have no idea where to find a mentor. Thank you for today's talk. It's been amazing.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, first and foremost, for that. There's 3 or 4 things that you've said there. So let me try and pick out some of the bits that I think I've caught, and forgive me if I've missed any elements of that. So I think in reverse order, I think being a imposter syndrome it's a relatively real thing. But I think imposter syndrome is also because you haven't accepted what you're really, really good at, and you're judging yourself by other people's parameters. So when you feel that imposter syndrome, I think it's important to start to think about and judge yourself by your own rules, because you wouldn't start in business if you wasn't if you didn't have a unique offering. Otherwise, you're just being very vanilla. So what is it that you bring to the table that's unique? If it's your age, if it's your gender, if it's your race, if it's your discipline, whatever it is, that's unique to you. That's yours to use. So embrace your diversity in that sense and utilize that to your best advantage. And again, you know, linking into your question around being a young lady in the tech space, well, that's an advantage, right? Because there's things that you can bring into this tech space as a female leader that a man couldn't bring in. So it's about how you articulate your value in that way, you know, and the more female tech entrepreneurs we have is the more I think the country and the world will benefit, but also the more kind of entrepreneurs from Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, the more entrepreneurs we have from different orientations. So embracing your diversity is absolutely fundamental for me, more than ever before. And in terms of being the first in your family, well, hey, if you truly believe in what you're doing, you'll prove everybody wrong. But the real question is, do you truly believe that you can really make this happen? Because you have to be insane to start this journey in the first place. But that insanity will be the very fuel that will drive you forward if you embrace it, use it, and try and black out the noise as much as possible. No, not always easy, but do the best that you can.
The next one is from Amike. Is it possible to be a variety of different leaders? For example, servant, front, empathetic, and dictator. And if not, how can you take those particular roles at different times? For example, a dictator who on occasion has to be empathetic, without burning your specific brand of leadership in the eyes of others?
Fantastic question. Not my model, but I was involved in some training a number of years ago, and they taught us a zoo model, which has always stuck with me. So think about a zoo. A zoo is made up of different animals. So imagine those different animals are different personalities. So you know, the lion is very much kind of the leader, trying forward. The rabbit might be scared in headlights, and you know, is very diligent and very observant. You know, very, very, very observant, but quite scared, doesn't really want to be in the forefront. You might have the elephant who just comes through and just absolutely just trashes the place, but you know, opens the pathway for other people. So think about leadership styles in different ways, and then think about being the zookeeper. Because as the zookeeper, you control how all those personalities interact. You put in the cages, you put in the structure, you put in the frameworks, you put in the boundaries and the barriers. You know what to feed certain things and when not to. You know when to let out certain personalities, allow them to roam. And you see where I'm coming from? So think about different leadership styles like a zookeeper. You're the zookeeper, but you're also all those different animals. And at any given time, you have to play a different part. But as long as you know the context of why you're doing that, it's okay to know when you have to step up and be that kind of lion, or when you want to step back and be that rabbit, etc., etc. And choose whatever animal you want. Just don't be the shark. I think they're the ones I dislike the most. But anyway, that's for you to consider and think about yourself.
The next one, what's the biggest risk you have ever taken on your journey?
Sorry, the biggest.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken on your journey?
Our biggest risk. Biggest risk was telling my founding team that I want to take the business in a completely different direction. And because I owned the majority of the equity, when they didn't agree, I did it anyway. And doing that smack bang in the middle of having an investment round. So, I mean, I won't go into the where's and what fors, and it was all amicable. It wasn't, you know, me trying to be the lion or the dictator. But in that example, I saw that as a team, because I brought together a team of experts in their own right, there were clashes in terms of what people wanted to do things, etc., etc. And we'd forgotten the vision that we had all agreed on. And I realized that vision that we had was still relevant, but we would go about it in the wrong way. And I put forward the ideal around that, and they still wanted to do it in their own way. So cut a long story short, I just kind of hired and fired in that sense. but I continued the conversation and was transparent with investors and that team about why I'm doing that, the risk that I'm taking, but the passion and the goal and the why that I believe in. And that made the whole process amicable. And since then, we've put in a new team, we got the investment, and it's absolutely accelerated our journey. So it was a risk that paid off, but it could have went completely south as well. But that was the biggest risk because it taught me the type of leader that I need to be if I'm truly congruent with what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and being willing to make those hard decisions, no matter how it made me feel and others feel. So that was the biggest risk.
The next one is from Debbie.
Yep.
What top tips would you give for someone for networking in lockdown?
Great question, and hi Deb. So in terms of top tips for networking in lockdown, as I think about it, in answer to the question, I think there are three key things for me. I think number one, it's been very clear on understanding people's pain point and validating that, because what you thought it might be previously might not be what it is now. And if you're networking to find new opportunities, it's even more important to make sure that what you want to do and how you can help is congruent with what their need is. And that could be based on sector, their size, their own challenges internally. So articulating that and validating that is really, really important. So being clear on that. I think the second thing is understanding what success looks like as well for that network or that individual that you're networking with. So when you're networking generally, think about and don't be afraid to talk about the fact that, you know, during this time, you're providing this opportunity and you'd be welcoming any connections or contacts to any individuals who might see this as adding value to them. But do it from an honest place where you want to start to build that relationship. Don't go out there all kind of sounds like relationship. That's a really what I call a quicksand relationship. If you do it in that way, there's no real strong foundation. So try and build that foundation with others, but let people know what solution you have and connections and introductions to provide that solution to the right people. Because networks have networks, and you don't know everyone. So make sure you're clear about what you're offering and the ask that you have. And I said the third thing, from a networking point of view, is that the beauty about this situation is that most people that you need to speak to are probably at home. So don't be afraid to reach out through the relevant mediums at the highest level that you can to start those conversations, because you might not get the opportunity to do that as simply and as easily as you have the opportunity to do so now. So do your research, make sure you're bringing value, make sure you know what their need is, or at least have an idea of, and then approach those individuals at the highest level possible, or more specifically to the decision maker, which may not always necessarily be the highest person possible, but make sure you're finding that equilibrium to then add value to that individual and use that time to network to build that relationship for those reasons. So understand the need, understand the solution, and just go and find those individuals, because you might not get to talk to them as quickly as possible ever before.
The next one is coming in anonymous. So it says, thank you for the webinar. It's been extremely helpful. RE Burning Bridges, my co-founder of 4 years isn't committed, but isn't saying so. Having previously brought it up, he hasn't changed. And I'm now concerned that having the conversation with him now could be a risk to our team culture and could rock the boat. But it's clear my motivation, not saying anything. What would you do?
Wow. Well, whoever you are, that's such a powerful question and such an important time in your business. Whatever the outcome, I would say first and foremost, I genuinely wish you the best of luck, because I'm sure that's a conversation that's taking place in many an organization. My view on that, and I'm not telling you what to do, but my view on that would be, this is about having an authentic and honest conversation with that individual, and revisiting why they're involved and why they're in the first place. And really getting back to basics in terms of the story of your business so far and the journey that you've been on, and use that conversation and be honest about saying you want to have this conversation because you want to just make sure that you're still aligned with the story that you're building together, and that your whole organization is building together. And more importantly, before these times, it's important to make sure that that alignment is clear, transparent, and true. Because the other side of these types of partnerships is that you don't know what your founders and your staff are going through themselves, personally and professionally. So it's really important that you have those honest conversations, but don't be afraid to bring that straight forward and say, this is why, because, you know, I want to make sure it's aligned because I'm concerned that I think we've got a little bit off kilter, or we're not maybe as aligned as we were. And I want to just listen to you, and hopefully you will listen back to me to ensure we're clear about what that does really mean and how we can move forward. But those honest conversations need to be had. So don't shy away from it. As difficult as it may be, don't shy away from it, because if you don't have that conversation, it will continue to undermine the opportunity and the potential that you and your team have as a collective.
And just as we come to a close with the webinar, we've had some lovely comments through, Joel. One from Graham, saying a great, honest, useful, inspirational talk today. I can see why you've been so successful. Congratulations on being you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And look, I'm just a normal lad from Birmingham who just refused to feed into the conformity that people said I needed to. And, you know, we see what's going on in the world at the moment in multiple facets and multiple ways and multiple experiences. And even more than ever before, I think COVID and kind of the global race situation has highlighted to me that it doesn't matter who you are, it's where you want to be. And you've got to really celebrate difference, but you've also got to be very authentic about how you're going to move forward. And you can get easily wrapped up into the kind of glitz and glamour of being an entrepreneur and business. But the reality is you've created something that you want to use to add value to other people. And as long as we remember that, we'll always be able to achieve success, whatever success looks like to you. But just remember the real essence of why we're doing this. You know, I'm not saying you don't want to get a nice house and a yacht and a car and all those types of things. I want those things too. But the reality is that the purpose always has to be bigger than the materialism. And you've got to be very, very clear about who you are, what you are, and how you want to become a person and create the vision that you want it to be. So I wish you all the best of luck with all your journeys, and feel free to connect on me across socials. And I thank the team today for giving the opportunity just to share my kind of humble views on my own experience. And thank you again for being involved.
Joel, thank you so much for joining us today. You'll also be pleased to know there's been lots of connections going on in the chats between attendees, helping one another with leadership and things like that. It's been absolutely great. Just to let you know that the webinar has been recorded and will be available to catch up from 5 p.m. today. So you can find replay and future webinars at www.freshbusinessthinking.haysummit.com or by clicking on the link in the comments. Our next webinar takes place on Thursday, the 18th of June with Rachel Flanagan. Importance of business agility. I have also included Joel's Twitter in the comments, so if you would like to ask him any further questions or connect, you can do so through that link. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you again, Joel.
No problem. Take care.
Goodbye, everybody.